The year was 1881, and the western frontier was still wild with promise and peril. I was working as a conductor on the newly established Transcontinental Railroad, a position I'd fought tooth and nail to secure after 3 years of backbreaking. Labor laying tracks across the unforgiving terrain of the American West. My uniform, pressed blue jacket with brass buttons and matching cap, was my pride, a symbol that I, Thomas Harrington, had risen above my humble beginnings in Boston's crowded tenements. The California Zephyr route was my domain, running from Chicago to San Francisco. The journey took several days, and my job was to ensure order and comfort for the passengers, at least those who had paid for the privilege. It was a blistering July afternoon when we pulled away from the station in Cheyenne, Wyoming. The air inside the passenger cars was thick with cigar smoke and the mingled scents of perfume and sweat. I moved through the first-class carriage, tipping my hat to the ladies in their fine silk dresses and nodding respectfully to gentlemen in tailored suits. "Tickets, please," I announced, making my way methodically down the aisle. When I reached the third-class carriage, the atmosphere changed dramatically. Here, the wooden benches were crowded with laborers, immigrants, and those of modest means. The windows were open, offering little relief from the dust and heat. That's when I first noticed him, a man of perhaps 50 years, dressed in clothes so worn they barely deserved the name. His trousers were patched in several places, his boots scuffed beyond repair, and his shirt had long since faded to an indeterminate color. A scraggly grey beard covered much of his weathered face, and beneath the brim of his battered hat I could see eyes that seemed to hold both weariness and something else, a quiet watchfulness that made me inexplicably uneasy. "Ticket, sir," I said, standing before him. He looked up slowly. "I'm afraid I don't have one, young man." My expression hardened. "Then I'm afraid you'll have to disembark at the next stop." "The next stop is 30 miles away, in the middle of nowhere," he replied, his voice surprisingly refined for a man of his appearance. "That's not my concern, sir. Rules are rules." He smiled faintly. "Perhaps we could come to some arrangement. I'm heading to Sacramento on urgent business." I'd heard such pleas before, too many times to count. Every day someone had an excuse, a story, a reason why the rules shouldn't apply to them. "No arrangements," I said firmly. "You either pay for a ticket or you get off at Bitter Creek Station." The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn leather pouch. "I have some money, but not enough for a full fare. Would this suffice?" He held out a few coins and what looked like a gold nugget the size of a small pebble. I examined the offering, then shook my head. "Company policy prohibits bartering. Cash fare only." "This nugget is worth 10 times the ticket price," he said. Quietly, "It's worth nothing to the Central Pacific Railroad," I countered. "I need to see a valid ticket or payment for one." A woman sitting nearby, clutching a young child to her chest, leaned forward. "Sir," she whispered to me, "I'll share our seat with him. Please let him stay." I turned to her sharply. "Ma'am, that would be against regulations. Each passenger must have their own paid seat." The train whistle blew. We were approaching Bitter Creek Station, little more than a water stop in the Wyoming wilderness. "Last chance," I told the man. "Purchase a ticket or prepare to disembark." He looked at me steadily, those watchful eyes seeming to peer right through me. "Young man, I understand you're doing your job, but sometimes compassion outweighs regulations." Something in his tone, not pleading but almost paternal, irritated me further. Who was this vagrant to lecture me on morality? "Those who make the rules know better than those who break them," I replied coldly. "This is a business, not a charity." The train began to slow, brakes screeching against the iron rails. I stood my ground waiting. Finally, the old man sighed, gathered a small canvas sack from under his seat, and rose to his feet. As the train stuttered to a halt beside the desolate platform, I escorted him to the exit. The blistering heat hit us like a wall as I helped him down the steps. "God bless you anyway, son," he said, without a trace of bitterness. I tipped my hat reflexively, uncomfortable with his graciousness. "Safe travels, sir." As the train pulled away, I watched through the window as his figure grew smaller, standing alone on the wooden platform, with nothing but endless prairie surrounding him. For a brief moment, something like doubt crept into my mind. The nearest town was miles away, and nightfall would bring coyotes and who knew what else, but I pushed the thought aside. I was simply doing my job, maintaining order. The railroad couldn't function if people rode for free. Rules existed for a reason. Little did I know that this encounter would be the beginning of a journey that would change everything I thought. I knew about worth, judgment, and the true measure of a man's character. What will happen when Thomas discovers the true identity of the man he abandoned at Bitter Creek Station? The shocking revelation is just moments away. If you're enjoying this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our compelling narrative videos. Join our community of story lovers and be the first to experience our next adventure. 3 weeks later, I was summoned to the Sacramento office of Edward Hayes, a name I vaguely recognized as one of the principal investors in the Central Pacific Railroad. My mind raced with possibilities as I was escorted through the marble lobby and up to an ornate office overlooking the Sacramento River. The door opened, and my blood ran cold. Despite the expensive suit and neatly trimmed beard, I recognized him instantly, the old man from Bitter Creek Station. "Mr. Harrington," he said with a smile that held no malice, "please sit down." My legs nearly gave out as I lowered myself into a leather chair. The man I'd abandoned in the Wyoming wilderness was Edward Hayes, one of the wealthiest railroad magnates in America. "Sir, I had no idea who you were," I stammered. "If I'd known, you would have treated me differently," he finished. "And that's precisely why I didn't tell you." He poured 2 glasses of bourbon, handing one to me. My fingers trembled as I accepted it. "Once every year I travel my railroads as an ordinary man," Hayes explained. "It's educational." "But why risk such discomfort?" I asked, finding my voice at last. He laughed genuinely. "Comfort teaches us nothing. When I was your age, I laid tracks for the Union Pacific. Back-breaking work. It taught me the value of every spike, every mile of track." His eyes locked with mine. "Now I make decisions affecting thousands of lives. How can I do that wisely if I forget what it's like to be one of those lives?" Shame burned in my chest. "I was just following regulations, sir." "Indeed you were, to the letter." He studied me intently. "Your record is exemplary, never late, never a complaint, which makes your behavior at Bitter Creek all the more interesting to me." He leaned forward. "You followed the rules perfectly, but did you do the right thing?" The question hung in the air. I had no answer. "After you left me," Hayes continued quietly, "I waited 3 hours in the sun before a cattle trader offered me a ride. He didn't ask if I could pay. He saw a fellow human in need and responded with kindness." Each word landed like a physical blow. "I'm truly sorry, sir," I said, and meant it. Hayes nodded, accepting my apology. "Do you know why I built railroads, Mr. Harrington?" "For profit, sir, partly. But when I laid those first tracks with my own hands, I was driven by something else: connection. Railroads don't just transport goods and people. They connect communities, ideas, lives. They make us neighbors instead of strangers." He rose and walked to the window. "The rules governing railroad employees exist for good reason, but they should serve the greater purpose, connecting humanity." He turned back to me. "I have a proposition for you, one that may surprise you." He slid a document across his desk. "I'm establishing a new division, passenger welfare and community relations, to ensure our railroads serve not just those who can afford tickets, but all who need transportation. I want you to lead it." I stared at him in disbelief. "Me? But I'm the one who—" "Precisely," he interrupted. "Those who have never made mistakes rarely understand their impact. But those who have faced the consequences of their rigid thinking have the potential to become the most thoughtful reformers." From his desk drawer, he withdrew a familiar object, the gold nugget from the train. "This is from my first claim in '49. I've carried it ever since, a reminder of my beginnings. I offered it to you to see if you could recognize value in unexpected forms." He placed it between us. "The position includes a substantial salary increase and a company residence in Sacramento. But it also requires the courage to challenge established thinking, including your own. Why give me this chance after how I treated you?" "Because redemption is more valuable than punishment," he said simply, "and because I believe you're capable of it. Thomas's journey from rigid rule follower to compassionate leader is about to unfold. Will he embrace this unexpected opportunity? For redemption, subscribe now to support our channel and get more immersive stories like this one delivered straight to your feed. Don't forget to leave a comment sharing what you would have done in Thomas's position. The final chapter is coming. Right up. 1 year later, I stood on the platform at Bitter Creek Station, barely recognizing the place where I'd once abandoned a man to the wilderness. What had been a desolate wooden platform surrounded by nothing but prairie grass and distant mountains was now transformed into a proper station house, complete with a red brick ticket office, a cozy waiting room with a potbelly stove, and a small cafe serving hot coffee and fresh bread to weary travelers. The wooden sign bearing the station's name had been repainted in bold black letters against a crisp white background, no longer weathered and forgotten. This transformation had been the first project of our new passenger welfare division, my personal mission and redemption. Every brick laid, every nail hammered, was a testament to our commitment that no one would ever again be left stranded in this unforgiving landscape, regardless of their means. The station now stood as a beacon of hope rather than a point of abandonment. The distant whistle of the approaching California zephyr echoed across the valley, and I straightened my jacket, smoothing down the new insignia that marked my position. The familiar rumble of iron wheels against steel tracks grew louder until the massive locomotive hissed to a stop before me, steam billowing around the platform. As passengers began to disembark, my eyes were drawn to a family of 5, a tired-looking man with calloused hands, a woman holding an infant wrapped in a threadbare blanket, and 2 young children clinging to their mother's skirts. Their clothes were clean but worn, and their expressions conveyed both hope and uncertainty as they looked around the unfamiliar surroundings, clearly overwhelmed. I approached them with a warm smile, extending my hand. "Mr. and Mrs. Peterson?" The father's eyes widened slightly in surprise. He quickly removed his hat, revealing sun-bleached hair, and clutched the brim nervously between work-hardened fingers. "Yes, sir. That's us. How did you know?" "Welcome to Bitter Creek," I said, my voice carrying a genuine warmth that still sometimes surprised me after years of formal detachment. "I'm Thomas Harrington from the Railroad Passenger Welfare Office. The station master in Cheyenne telegraphed ahead about your arrival. I understand this is your first step toward a new life in San Francisco." Mrs. Peterson shifted the sleeping infant in her arms, her eyes brimming with a mixture of exhaustion and trepidation. The 2 older children, a boy of perhaps 7 and a girl no more than 5, peered at me with wide, curious eyes. "We sold our farm in Ohio after 3 years of drought," she explained, her voice soft but determined. "James has a cousin who says there's work in the shipyards in San Francisco. We scraped together everything we had, but—" She hesitated, clearly embarrassed. "The tickets cost more than we expected. The prices had gone up since we received the letter. We're We're a little short for the remainder of the journey." As she spoke, I was suddenly transported back to that scorching July day, standing before another traveller, unmoved by circumstances, rigid in my enforcement of the rules. The memory was still sharp enough to sting. I smiled at the family, feeling the weight of Edward Hayes's gold nugget in my pocket, where I now carried it always. "You're exactly where you need to be," I assured them, watching relief begin to soften the worry lines etched in both parents' faces. Our community transition program was created specifically for families like yours. We've arranged comfortable housing for all of you in the station annex, while Mr. Peterson works alongside our station master for 2 weeks. Mr. Peterson's posture straightened, dignity returning to his bearing. "I'm not afraid of hard work, sir." "No, you're not," I replied, recognizing the same pride I'd once possessed. "The work is fair, the hours reasonable, and it will cover the remainder of your fare to San Francisco, plus provide a small stipend to help you get settled when you arrive. Your children can attend our local school during your stay, and there's a physician who visits weekly if you need medical attention." Mrs. Peterson's eyes welled with tears as the burden of uncertainty lifted from her shoulders. The little girl, sensing her mother's emotion, reached up and patted her arm with a small hand. "God bless you, Mr. Harrington," Mr. Peterson said, his voice thick. We'd heard such terrible stories about being stranded halfway, with no means to continue. I nodded, understanding those fears all too well. Those days are behind us now. This station, this program, exists to ensure no one's journey ends before they reach their destination. As I guided the grateful family toward the station house, where a hot meal awaited them, movement at one of the train windows caught my eye. A distinguished gentleman with a neatly trimmed grey beard was watching our interaction with keen interest. Edward Hayes, making his annual journey as an ordinary passenger, observing the fruits of our labour. Our eyes met briefly, and the slight nod he gave me carried more weight than any formal commendation ever could. When the Petersons were settled, I stepped back onto the platform as the California Zephyr prepared to continue its westward journey. I reached into my pocket and felt the smooth contours of the gold nugget I now carried everywhere, not as a reminder of my mistake, but of the lesson it had taught me. True value isn't always visible at first glance, whether in a person or an opportunity, and sometimes what appears worthless to one system of measurement proves priceless in another. The station that had once been a point of abandonment now stood as a waypoint of hope. The rules that had once been my shield were now tools to be wielded with wisdom and compassion, and I, who had once been so certain of the difference between right and wrong, had discovered the vast territory that lies between adhering to regulations and honoring our shared humanity. For in the end, it wasn't about throwing someone off a train or discovering they owned the railroad. It was about recognizing that every person's journey matters, regardless of the ticket they can afford, and that sometimes the most important connections we forge aren't the iron rails spanning a bikini continent, but the bridges of understanding between one human heart and another.